inland rural Portugal, certainly the mountains, since the 1990s, have been losing population by, on average, 1 person a week. There are a fair number of large, sizable farms and farm buildings, many with collapsed roofs, ripe for technological off-grid living. Not the no or poor electricity, no internet, last century living that's been driving people towards the coast throughout Portugal. It's almost turning into a north to south urban megalopolis. A bit of an exaggeration, that. It's really sort of relaxed, non-estate, suburban, you call it, with a few national parks stopping it all, a bit joining together. But when you're looking for a place to get away from it all, surely you can be free here. The rules, the nags, the demands, they're far, far away. But there'll be times when you want something to do, when the mindfulness of your chores just isn't quite enough. There's something missing. You can only indulge in tantric so many hours a day and so many days of the week. And what do you do when it rains? It rains in Portugal, in the mountains. This isn't the Iberia of forest fires. It rains rather a lot in the mountains in Portugal. This land full of huge rock boulders around Marvao. A whole county of them, a whole state of them. Huge rock boulders dispersed with cork oaks and little streams, rivers. I'd call them hillocks rather than hills or mountains, but we are higher elevation. And it is a little colder, and you do want to invest in a thick iron log-burning stove. 6,000 years ago, this area must have been thriving. 6,000 years ago, there was the dolmen era, when Stone Age people, would stack rocks on top of each other and make tombs and clumsily roofed shelters. There have been more discovered around here than anywhere else in Europe. I guess we were sheltering under yew trees all winter at the time. The Roman era found the area very useful. The Visigoths, they didn't mix. They sort of wanted a bit of apartheid, really. They followed the Romans. It was after the Arab and Berber invasion that the area really started to form its character, if you ask me. This was a Berber area. These were the bandits that made their retreat strongholds up in the mountains and then raided from there. Marvao gets its name from one of these. He also had a new city in Badajoz, and he would go raiding down to Cordoba, the Berber raiding the Arabs. And then when both the Cordoba Arabs and the Seville Arabs had had enough of his Moorishness, he planned to burn his new city of Badajoz, as you spell it, to the ground and retreat to his once Roman fortress in Marvao. Sheer cliff walls. It's a very effective fortress. It kept out the Spanish, the French, the Austrians, all at the same time, even as late as the Fantastic War. Yes, I know. What sort of mentality talks about Fantastic War? It was part of the 7 Years' War, where Europe is fighting primary theatre of operations, do they call it, in Europe, but then there's also territorial attacks in the colonies between each other, most of which sort of ended in stalemate, really. What made it a fantastic war? Well, it's this local terrain again, great for rebels, and great for guerrilla warfare. A Spanish and French army of 40 or 50,000 people, trained soldiers. They took casualties of about 10,000, mainly from the local peasant population, acting as guerrilla warfarers, hiding amongst the boulder rocks and jumping out and slaughtering people. But they were also practising a scorched earth policy. So many little hiding places for those big landowner farms to hide their produce. Pigs had been local produce in the cave scratchings from the Dolmen era right up to the Iron Age. The dolmens were still being built, pigs were still being raised, and the same through the very stable centuries of Roman era. But the Spanish troops of the Fantastic War, same name on both sides, were starving and deserting in droves, and the local peasants were slaughtering them and feeding them to their pigs. And likely dogs. There's two local breeds of dog. One looks very much like a St. Bernard, and the other looks like a cross between a hyena and a pit bull, a mastiff type thing. The Portuguese, great seafarers with the help of the Arab pilots, but their tiny army of about 7,000 people, they asked for help from their British loose allies, and they sent a boatload of 7,000, 5,000 people, who reorganised the whole Portuguese army as the cannon fodder with the British as their bosses, and knew what they were doing. Well, they did seem to. They cut off the Spanish starvation retreat and slaughtered a load. But you can't help but think that the peasants, my local peasants, did all the heavy lifting, and the British did all the fantastic. No real battles. I think that's perhaps the fantastic thing about it, but big wins by means of subtle strategies and guerrilla warfare. The few people in Marvao Castle, fortified again by old Sancho and Dennis, managed to repel that 50,000 strong army. Land to grow vegetables and keep animals inside the fortress, and springs for water. I think that's partly the secret. It's always been able to see things coming on the west-east trading route, and that Roman bridge to Alcantara. Lots of long straight roads in this area of Portugal. You know why? The Romans. The chestnuts make a good food source as well, especially for the pigs. It's a speciality. The Visigoths weren't interested in the east-west trade. They did everything by river. This was the Lusitania region. Urban culture became more nomadic, pastoralist. Tribes became more blood, family and tribe in their allegiances and hierarchies. War, slave raids, banditry, religious intolerance and apartheid was the Visigoth era. And the whole of Iberia, really. As Visigoth barbarians ran wild through Spain, with the evil of pestilence raging as well, the tyrannical tax collector seized the wealth and goods stored in the cities, and the soldiers devoured them. A famine ran riot, so dire that, driven by hunger, humans devoured human flesh. Mothers, too, feasted on the bodies of their own children, whom they had killed and cooked themselves. And this, with the 4 plagues of sword, famine, pestilence, and wild beasts raging everywhere, the Annunciation foretold by the Lord through his prophets was fulfilled. Writes a Christian guy once. Christian lands have been retaken with the help of the Knights Templar and Hospitaller. The orders of knights sort of re-established the Marvao region a little bit. They became a whole sort of border force between Spain and Portugal, like a buffer zone almost. They had been invited in by the King of Portugal. The Marvao region had always been a border amongst the warring Celtic tribes before Rome, with their round chosas, round houses in series-forming settlements, with broom-thatched roofs, corbelled circular dry stone shelters, and barns with a false cupola. Chosas. These Lusitania Celts who did the terracing, the Berbers not really investing in that anything like the same way as the Arabs did. They were bandits. Any riches from the Roman era were looted by the British during the Anglo-Portuguese Fantastic War and taken off to the British Museum. There's been that in some other countries, hasn't there? The Knights Templar and Hospitaliers resettled the barren lands depopulated for centuries of bloodshed and warfare, and abandoned by fleeing Berber refugees. France was big in the world of knights in shining armour, and these lands are some of the treasure that they claimed. And it bears their name: Nice, Toulouse, Montauban, Arles, all said in a Portuguese accent, but these were the names. There were Galicians too. They guaranteed safe passage along the Tagus River, Tomar, Castelo Branco, Castelo de Vide, Portalegre, Alcantara. The knights were a guiding hand for 2 or more centuries, around the time when the windmills of Portugal were first being built on the Persian-Iranian model. But a local battle leaving 100,000 Moors dead, would be what would bring stability again to the Marvao region and use it as a staging post to launch attacks, pushing the Moors of southern Spain further out across the Mediterranean. How does a young nation claim the town as its, not its bordering neighbour? It gives it a royal charter, a market, a foral. It was a cistern building area, rainwater collection. Now this is something, as well as walking, get out and walk this landscape, even in the rain. Look, think of yourself as a bandit. What was it like for them? But something to do when it's raining, make use of your water deposit. It's still going to be warm. Swim, bathe, drink from that ever-replenishing beer bottle on the poolside, bathe in your cistern. You're going to be wet anyway. The region's a watershed between the Tagus Basin off towards the coast, stretching out, and the plains of Extremadura and Albuquerque. Fonzao. These days are ours, though. If you don't want to live on the coast and feel like you're hugely wealthy compared to the locals and don't want to live like a local, you could live like a local out in the hills and be king of all you survey. Have your luxuries, your daily wine, plant vegetable fields in other people's land and harvest it for yourself. It's never going to be used. No one's ever going to mind. Perhaps squat the big farmhouse of the big landowner, if it's secluded enough from the local mayor, wanting to collect taxes. You could try gold panning in the rivers, which has traditionally been an income stream. But it's the unique and varied scenery. Get out on a walk, take a bottle of wine with you, worship the local owl deity. Start writing that book you were always going to. This is where one of the earliest written scripts in Europe originated. In the 4th century, 6,000 people of Portugal's 6 million lived here. There's less than that now. But the decay was there in the 8th century. That little golden era was based on the horse station for traders. You can still get out horse riding in the rain. You won't get cold horse riding. You can see the steam coming up off the animal between your legs. If you're lucky on your walk, you might come across some medlars or figs, mulberries for the silk production, some citrus trees. It was a border country where Jewish peoples had considerable freedoms. They managed to avoid their sons being recruited for battle, protection money, taxes for wars, skirmishes and summer raids could be hidden from, and then the profits of supplying the war against the Arabs extended further south. It became the front line and the most profitable. There's an atmosphere about the Marvao district that's very ancient. At times you have some peculiar feeling as those evoked by Stonehenge and that amazing druid monument at Callanish in the Isle of Lewis. Picking your way along the steep, stony pathways, you would not be at all surprised to meet a Phoenician trader or a Roman soldier. It would be the most natural thing in the world to meet someone from a bygone age in this environment, this landscape that just hasn't changed. Almost virgin, enough to make your imagination run riot. Caguei-me toda.